Have you ever wondered, my dears, how much betrayal a human heart can hold before it simply stops beating? I used to think there were limits to pain, boundaries beyond which a person couldn't be hurt anymore. But life has a way of teaching us that suffering is bottomless, that humiliation has no floor, and that the people we trust most can wound us in ways we never imagined possible. Sometimes I lie awake at night, even now, decades later, and wonder how I survived what I'm about to tell you. They say that love makes us blind, but I think it's more complicated than that. Love makes us willing to be blind. It makes us dismiss the evidence right in front of our faces, because accepting the truth would shatter everything we've built our lives upon. For months, maybe even a year, I saw things that didn't add up, heard excuses that didn't quite ring true, felt a coldness creeping into my marriage like frost spreading across a window pane. But I chose not to see. I chose not to hear. I chose not to feel. Until the night I couldn't choose anymore. My name is Beatrice, though most people call me Bee. I'm 76 years old now, and this story happened in 1978, when I was 32 and thought I knew everything about the man I'd married. Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. I want to know who's listening to this old woman pour out her heart today. We lived in Ashford Green, a market town in the Cotswolds, where honey-colored stone cottages lined cobbled streets, and everyone knew not just your name, but your entire family history going back 3 generations. It was the kind of place where you couldn't buy a pint of milk without having a 10-minute conversation, where the church bells marked time every Sunday morning, and where secrets were supposed to be impossible to keep. My husband, James, was the town's bank manager. He worked at Barclays Bank on the High Street, in that imposing Victorian building with the brass nameplates and marble floors that echoed when you walked. Everyone respected him, my dears. Farmers came to him for loans. Shopkeepers trusted him with their deposits. The mayor himself would tip his hat to James when they passed on the street. James was 40 years old then, handsome in that solid, dependable way, broad shoulders, dark hair just beginning to silver at the temples, hands that looked strong and capable. He wore 3-piece suits to work, always perfectly pressed, with a gold pocket watch his father had given him. On Sundays, he'd wear his good tweed jacket to church, and I'd walk beside him feeling proud, my hand tucked into the crook of his arm. We had 3 children, who were my entire world. Daniel was 14, tall and serious like his father, already talking about studying law at university. Rebecca was 11, all wild red curls and imagination, forever writing stories in her notebooks. And little Sophie was 8. shy and gentle, who collected wildflowers and pressed them between the pages of old books. Our house was a lovely Georgian townhouse on Elm Street, with wisteria climbing up the front and a garden out back, where I grew vegetables and roses. I can still smell those roses, my dears the sweet, heavy scent mixing with the lavender I'd planted along the path, and the rosemary that grew by the kitchen door. I used to cut fresh rosemary every morning to flavor the lamb roasts, and the smell would cling to my fingers all day. Looking back now, I can see it was almost too perfect, like a painting rather than a real life. Beautiful to look at, but flat somehow, without depth or shadow. But I didn't see it then. I thought I was blessed. I thought I was living the life every woman wanted. You know how they say pride comes before a fall. I was proud, so very proud of my respectable husband, my lovely children, my perfect house. I thought I'd done everything right. Little did I know that underneath that perfect surface, everything was rotting away. The first strange thing I noticed was in March of 1978. I'd been sorting through the washing basket. I did the laundry every Monday morning, without fail, using Persil washing powder that came in those blue and white boxes. The smell of it reminds me of those days even now. That sharp, clean scent. I found a handkerchief in James's trouser pocket. That wasn't unusual. He always carried a pressed handkerchief. But this one wasn't his. It was white cotton with delicate pink embroidery. In the corner, clearly a woman's handkerchief, and it smelled of perfume. Not my perfume. I wore Yardley English rose. This was something else, something heavier and sweeter. Almost cloying. James, I called out that evening, holding up the handkerchief. Where did this come from? He barely glanced at it. Oh, that? Mrs. Patterson was crying in my office yesterday. Her husband's farm is in trouble. Needed to extend their loan. I lent her my handkerchief, and she must have given me hers by mistake. Didn't want to embarrass her by mentioning it. It made perfect sense. James was always helping people, always kind to clients in distress. I felt silly for even asking. But then there were the late nights, 2, sometimes 3 times a week. James would come home at 9 or 10 o'clock, long after the bank had closed. Paperwork, he'd explain, loosening his tie. You wouldn't believe the amount of paperwork involved in running a bank branch, B. It's exhausting. He'd smell of cigarettes, though he'd never smoked. Mr. Hewitt smokes like a chimney in the office. He'd say when I mentioned it, can't avoid it when you're working late with him. Who would have thought that every single excuse was a carefully constructed lie? The phone calls started in April. Our telephone was in the hallway. One of those heavy black Bakelite phones with a rotary dial. It would ring at odd hours, sometimes early in the morning, before James left for work. Sometimes late at night, when I'd answer, there would be breathing on the other end, then a soft click, as someone hung up, probably young troublemakers, James said when I mentioned it, or a faulty connection. Don't worry about it, love, but I did worry. Something felt wrong, like a note played slightly off key in a familiar song. Then there was the money. I'd always managed our household accounts. James gave me a set amount each month for groceries and expenses. But suddenly, in May, he told me he needed to reduce it. The bank's cutting costs, he explained. My salary's been affected. We all need to tighten our belts a bit, I'm afraid. We went from £30 a month to 20, then to 15. I started buying cheaper cuts of meat, making soups from vegetable scraps, darning socks instead of buying new ones. The children noticed but didn't complain. Rebecca asked once why we weren't having cake anymore for Sunday tea, and my heart broke a little. We're saving up for something special, I told her, though I didn't know what. James started locking his study door. This was new, he'd never done it before. Confidential bank documents, he said. I could lose my job if anything went missing or got into the wrong hands. You understand, don't you? B, of course I understood. I was a good wife. I didn't question. I didn't pry. I trusted Dot. What a fool I was, my dears. What an absolute fool. The night of June 24th, 1978, is seared into my memory like a brand. Every detail is sharp and clear, even after all these years. I'd had a terrible migraine all day, one of those crushing headaches that makes life painful, and every sound too loud. I'd taken 2 Aspro tablets and gone to bed early, around 7 o'clock, while James said he'd stay downstairs to finish some work. The children were spending the weekend with my sister in Oxford. She'd taken them to visit the museums. The house was quiet, too quiet. I remember lying there in our bedroom with the curtains drawn, a damp flannel on my forehead, trying to will the pain away. The medication must have worked because I fell into a deep, heavy sleep. When I woke, it was dark. The clock on the bedside table, a wind-up alarm clock, with a loud tick, showed 11:23 p.m. I could hear sounds from downstairs, voices, laughter, a woman's laughter, high and bright. My first thought was that James must be watching television. But we didn't own a television. James had always said they were frivolous. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs, and that woman's laugh again, closer now. James, are you sure? The voice was young, breathy with excitement. She's dead asleep. My husband replied. My husband. I gave her sleeping tablets in her tea earlier. She won't wake up for hours. My blood turned to ice, my dears. I lay there, frozen, as our bedroom door opened. The landing light was on, and I could see through my eyelashes. I'd closed my eyes immediately, some instinct for self-preservation taking over. I watched as James led a woman into our bedroom. She was young, couldn't have been more than 23 or 24, with long blonde hair and a cheap dress that looked too tight. I recognized her. Jennifer Mills, the new clerk at the bank. The one James had hired just 3 months ago. "This is your bed?" she asked, running her hand along the brass bedpost. "Our bed," James corrected, and there was something bitter in his voice. "Though I suppose it's more mine than hers. I paid for it. After all, I pay for everything." "Our bed," James corrected, and there was something bitter in his voice. "Though I suppose it's more mine than hers. I paid for it. After all, I pay for everything. You know that feeling, my dears, when your heart stops, when time seems to freeze, and you can't breathe, can't move, can't do anything except lie there while your world collapses around you? That's what it felt like. They sat on the bed, on my side of the bed. The mattress dipped under their weight, and I had to fight to keep my breathing steady and slow, to not scream, to not leap up and claw that woman's eyes out. "What about your wife?" Jennifer asked. She was looking right at me, and I could smell her perfume, the same heavy, sweet smell from the handkerchief. James laughed, and the cruelty in that laugh made me want to die. "She's harmless, boring, really, good for cooking and cleaning and looking respectable, but that's about it. She hasn't got a brain in her head, and she certainly hasn't got any money of her own. Where's she going to go? What's she going to do?" They kissed, right there, inches from where I lay pretending to sleep. I could hear every sound, every whisper, every movement. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to die, but I lay still, silent tears running down my face and soaking into my pillow. What happened next? My dears, I won't describe in detail. Suffice to say, I lay there for over an hour while my husband betrayed me in the most intimate, degrading way possible, believing I was drugged and unconscious. Finally, they left. I heard them creeping down the stairs, heard the front door close, heard James's car start up and drive away. Only then did I allow myself to sob great, gasping sobs that shook my entire body. But even that wasn't the worst of it. Oh no, my dears, that was only the beginning. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I couldn't. I lay in the darkness, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed. At some point, as dawn was breaking, I got up and went to James's study. The door was locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key in a vase in the sitting room. My hands shook as I unlocked the door and went inside. The study smelled of pipe tobacco and old leather. James's desk was neat as always, everything in its place. But I started searching, pulling open drawers, looking through files. My friend Iris from next door found me there 2 hours later. She'd come over with fresh eggs from her chickens, as she did every Saturday, and found the front door unlocked and me sitting on the floor of James's study, surrounded by papers, too shocked to cry any more. "B," she said, her voice frightened. "B, love, what's happened?" Iris was 71 then, a widow who'd lost her husband in the war and lived alone with her cats. She was sharp as a tack and kind as the day is long. I told her everything about the night before, about what I'd found in the study. What I'd found, my dears, was worse than the affair. So much worse James had been embezzling from the bank for over 2 years. Thousands of pounds transferred into accounts I didn't know existed. He'd been gambling. There were receipts from racetracks. I owe us betting slips. He'd remortgaged our house without telling me, forged my signature on the documents. The mortgage payments were 3 months overdue. We were about to lose everything, and there were more women, not just Jennifer. There were letters, dozens of letters from different women in different towns. Some of the letters had photographs, Polaroid pictures that made me feel sick. "Oh, B," Iris said, her old hands clasping mine. "Oh, my dear girl, we need to sort this out. We need to protect you and the children. But how do you protect yourself when your entire life is built on lies?" James came home at noon. He found me sitting at the kitchen table with all the evidence spread out in front of me, the letters, the bank statements, the mortgage documents, the photographs. His face went white, then red, then a kind of mottled purple. "You had no right," he hissed. "That study is private. You had no right to go through my things, your things." My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "These documents show you've stolen from the bank, gambled away our savings, remortgaged our house, and conducted affairs with at least 6 different women. But I had no right?" "You don't understand," he started. "Then explain it to me." He sat down heavily, his shoulders sagging. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, might show some remorse. But then his face hardened. "I never loved you, B. I married you because my father insisted I settle down, get respectable, advance my career. You were suitable, nothing more. Little did I know those words would hurt worse than anything else. And the money, the gambling, the affairs. I deserve better than this boring life," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I deserve excitement, passion, something more than coming home to the same dull woman every night. And the children?" He waved his hand dismissively. "They'll be fine. Children are resilient. Get out," I said quietly. "What? Get out of this house now, before I call the police." He laughed. "And tell them what? That your husband's been unfaithful? That's not a crime, B. And all those documents, they're my word against yours. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected bank manager or his hysterical wife? He packed a bag and left within the hour. He moved in with Jennifer that very day. And then, my dears, the real nightmare began. The scandal broke like a wave over Ashford Green. By Monday, everyone knew. Everyone was talking. The bank discovered the embezzlement. Someone had finally audited James's accounts properly, and the truth came spilling out like poison. But here's what broke my heart. Most people blamed me. She must have driven him to it. I heard Mrs. Thornberry say at the butcher's shop. She was the mayor's wife, a woman who wore fox furs and looked down her nose at everyone. A man doesn't stray unless there's something wrong at home. I always thought she was cold. Mrs. Fletcher from the church committee whispered loudly enough for me to hear at the post office. Too proud by half, it's no wonder he looked elsewhere. At church that Sunday, people who'd smiled at me for years looked away. Pews emptied around me. When I went up for communion, I heard someone mutter shameful under their breath. I lost my volunteer position at the church jumble sale. We think it's best if you step back for a while, the vicar's wife said, not meeting my eyes. Given the circumstances, the children came home from my sister's to find their lives in ruins. Daniel, my poor serious boy, had to face his friends at school. Someone had spray-painted thief's son on his locker. Is it true? He asked me, his voice breaking. Did Dad really steal money? Did he really have a girlfriend? Yes, I said, because I couldn't lie to my children. I'm so sorry, darling, but we're going to be all right. I didn't believe it when I said it. Rebecca stopped eating. Sophie started having nightmares. The bank foreclosed on our house. We had 60 days before eviction. I had no job, no income, no savings. James had taken everything. We moved into a tiny council flat on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with cracked tiles, and a toilet that ran constantly. A kitchen so small you could barely turn around. The walls were thin. We could hear the neighbors arguing through them. There was damp in the corners that no amount of scrubbing could shift. I had 3 children to feed and clothe and keep in school, and absolutely no idea how I was going to do it. Asterisk looking back now. I don't remember making the decision to survive. There was no moment of grand determination, no inspiring speech. I simply got up each morning because the children needed breakfast. I kept going because stopping meant giving up, and giving up meant James had won. I started by taking in ironing. I put up a notice in the corner shop. Ironing service 1 shilling per item. Mrs. Ahmed, who ran the shop, let me pin it up for free. And I'll never forget that small kindness. The first week, I got 3 customers. I'd iron late at night after the children were asleep. standing at an old board I'd bought at a jumble sale, my feet aching, my back screaming. I'd use a borrowed iron that was too heavy and would sometimes scorch things if I wasn't careful. My hands developed calluses from gripping the handle, and the steam made my skin red and rough. I started making tablets, a traditional Scottish sweet my grandmother had taught me. You know the kind, my dears, made with butter and condensed milk and sugar, cooked slowly until it sets firm and melts on your tongue. I'd make batch after batch, cutting it into squares and wrapping each piece in waxed paper. I sold it at the Saturday market for 2 pence a piece. Rebecca and Sophie would help me, their small hands wrapping sweets while I cooked. Are we poor now, Mum? Sophie asked one evening, her voice small. We're managing, I told her, though my bank account had £7 in it and rent was due. We have each other, and that's what matters. I offered tutoring in English and maths. I had good education. I'd gone to grammar school and passed my O-levels with top marks. I charged 2 shillings an hour and prayed someone would hire me. Mrs. Ahmed sent her nephew, then her niece. Word spread slowly among the immigrant families in town who hadn't heard all the gossip about my shame, who just wanted their children to do well in school. I cleaned houses. This was the hardest, my dears, because I cleaned for people who'd once been my friends. I scrubbed Mrs. Henderson's floors on my hands and knees. I dusted Mrs. Fletcher's shelves while she watched me like I might steal the silver. I cleaned the bank manager's new house. James had been fired, and his replacement needed a cleaner. I scrubbed the toilets and thought about how far I'd fallen. The physical toll was crushing. I lost 3 stone in 6 months. My lovely dresses hung off me like sacks. My hair, which had been glossy and thick, became dull and thin from stress. There were permanent shadows under my eyes. My hands, which had once been soft enough to play piano, became rough and red, the nails broken and stained. I cried in the bathroom with the tap running so the children wouldn't hear. I cried while I ironed other people's sheets. I cried while I scrubbed floors, but I didn't stop. The tablet business grew. People started requesting it for special occasions. I added other sweets, coconut ice, peppermint creams, Edinburgh rock. I raised my prices to 3 pence, then 4 pence. I started getting orders from shops in neighboring towns. The tutoring brought more students. I was patient and good at explaining things, and children's grades improved under my teaching. I raised my rates to 3 shillings, then 5. By the end of that first terrible year, we were barely surviving, but we were surviving. The turning point came at the Harvest Festival in September 1979. 15 months after James had left, the festival was held in the church hall, with everyone bringing food to share, and the church ladies organizing everything. I'd wanted to skip it, but Rebecca begged me to go. Please, Mum, she said. Everyone at school will be there. I don't want to hide anymore. So I went. I brought a basket of my sweets to donate to the food table. Though Mrs. Fletcher looked at them like they might be poisoned, I stood at the edge of the hall, feeling like an outcast, watching everyone else laugh and socialize. Mrs. Thornberry was holding court, surrounded by the other church ladies, shooting disapproving looks in my direction. Then Miss Edith Bramley arrived. She was 84 years old, the oldest person in town, and rich from inherited wealth. She walked with a cane and spoke her mind regardless of what anyone thought. She walked directly to the food table, picked up one of my sweets, and ate it. Everyone watched. Beatrice, she called out in her strong, clear voice. Did you make these? Yes, Miss Bramley, I said quietly. They're excellent. Best tablet I've tasted since my own grandmother made it. She turned to face the crowd. I'd like to place an order. £10 worth for my bridge club next week. You could have heard a pin drop. My dears, £10 was a fortune. But Miss Bramley wasn't finished. She turned to Mrs. Thornberry, who was staring with her mouth open. Margaret, she said sharply, I seem to recall your husband was involved in some questionable land deals back in the 50s. Something about planning permissions and payments that weren't quite legal. Of course, everyone forgave him because he was a man and important. But Beatrice here has done nothing wrong except marry the wrong man, and you've all treated her like a criminal. Mrs. Thornberry went bright red. Furthermore, Miss Bramley continued, I've hired Beatrice to tutor my great-niece, and the girl's grades have improved remarkably. I've also bought her sweets for several occasions, and they're far superior to anything you can buy in shops. Perhaps instead of gossiping and judging, you should all support a hard-working woman who's doing her best for her children. She looked around the room with those fierce old eyes. Now, who else would like to place an order for these excellent sweets? Slowly, hesitantly, hands went up. First one, then another, then more. By the end of the evening, I had orders worth £40. Miss Bramley had given me back my dignity. The years that followed were hard work, my dears. But they were good years, better than the ones before, in some ways, because they were honest. My confectionery business grew steadily. I called it Beatrice's Traditional Sweets, and within 2 years, I was supplying 15 shops across 3 counties. I hired 2 women to help me, both of them also struggling, both grateful for the work. I moved us out of that council flat into a proper house. Nothing grand, but it had 3 bedrooms and a garden where the children could play. Sophie started smiling again. Rebecca's appetite came back. Daniel stopped having that haunted look in his eyes. I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. But I was proud of every penny I earned. Unlike James, I'd stolen nothing. I'd cheated no one. I'd built something real and good from nothing but determination and sugar, and my grandmother's old recipes. The tutoring continued. I became known as the best tutor in town, and parents, even respectable ones, started hiring me. I eventually charged 10 shillings an hour, and I was worth every penny. Daniel went to Oxford to study law, just as he'd always dreamed. He got a scholarship that paid most of it, and I paid the rest from my sweet business. He graduated top of his class and became a solicitor. Rebecca went to university to study literature. She became an English teacher and eventually a headmistress. She wrote a novel, too, based loosely on our experiences, that was published and sold quite well. Sophie became a doctor, my shy little girl who used to press wildflowers in books grew up to save lives. All 3 of them are successful and happy, my dears. All 3 of them have children of their own. Now I have 7 grandchildren who call me Nana and think I'm wonderful. And all 3 of my children have told me at various times that watching me survive and thrive taught them they could overcome anything. As for James, oh, my dears, James got exactly what he deserved. Jennifer left him within a year for someone younger and richer. He lost his position at the bank and couldn't get another one in banking. His reputation was ruined. He ended up working as an insurance salesman, never very successfully. He tried to contact me several times over the years, wanting to make amends or explain. I never responded. He attended Rebecca's wedding uninvited and tried to talk to me. I walked away. He has no relationship with his children. They're civil when necessary, but there's no love there. How could there be? He lives alone now, in a small flat in Brighton. I heard recently he's quite ill. I feel nothing about that, not satisfaction, not pity, nothing. He's simply irrelevant to my life. My confectionery business ran successfully until I retired at 70. I sold it to one of my employees, and it's still thriving. I won awards. I was featured in regional magazines. I made enough money to retire comfortably, to travel, to help my children buy their first homes. I'm 76 now, and when I look back on that terrible night in June 1978, lying in my bed, pretending to sleep, while my husband brought his mistress into our room, while he drugged me and laughed at me and called me boring and worthless, I feel something unexpected. I feel grateful, not grateful for the betrayal, my dears, not grateful for the pain or the humiliation or the years of struggle, but grateful for what it revealed, grateful that I discovered who I really was underneath all that respectability and propriety, grateful that my children saw real strength, not the fake strength of social position and money, but the true strength of character and determination. That man who drugged my tea and brought his mistress to our bed, who stole money and gambled it away, who thought I was too boring and stupid and trapped to ever escape him, he thought he'd destroyed me. Instead, he freed me. You see, my dears, sometimes the worst thing that happens to us is also the best thing. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to discover what we're truly capable of. Sometimes betrayal shows us we don't need the people we thought we couldn't live without. I survived. I thrived. And I did it on my own terms, with my own hands, building something real and true from the ruins of my shattered life. If you're going through something similar, if someone has betrayed you, or humiliated you, or made you feel worthless, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think. You are capable of more than you know. And the person who broke your heart doesn't get to define your future. You do. Thank you for listening to me today. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next stories. Share with someone who might be needing a little hope. Where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments. And remember, my dears, you're stronger than you know.